From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South. I'm Sani Gray. We start in Colombia, where President-Elect Ivan Duque is set to take the oath of office. Representatives of 17 countries, including 10 heads of state and government, are expected to attend the inauguration this afternoon. Duque won the election with national security at the top of his agenda. But now some fear that peace and reconciliation in Colombia could be at risk. The new Colombian president wants to modify the peace agreement that the outgoing president Juan Manuel Santos signed with the FARC in 2016. The incoming president will also have to decide whether or not to continue peace talks with the National Liberation Army, the ELN, as well as deal with the wave of violence against social leaders across the country. The aeronautical authorities have prohibited the use of drones in the surroundings of the Casa de Nariño ahead of the swearing-in of Ivan Duque. According to the government agency, the ban seeks to ensure the security of the president and the international guests who will be in attendance. It also comes after the attempted drone attack on the Venezuelan president, Nicolas Maduro. Our correspondent in Bogotá, Paulo Fernandez, has more details.
Cordial saludo para usted y para todos los televidentes.
The U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, will head the U.S. delegation at President-Elect Ivan Duque's inauguration ceremony. But in addition to attending this event, Haley will visit the Colombia-Venezuela border to see the situation of Venezuelan migrants that are arriving to Colombia daily, and also what is going on for Colombians regarding human rights. The ceremony for the change of government will take place this afternoon. In Simón Bolívar Square and in different cities across Colombia, the Colombia Humana movement is calling for protests to reject the killings of social leaders and to denounce the humanitarian crisis in some Colombian areas. Also, Colombian expats across the world have called for protests in different countries. While Ivan Duque swears in, Gustavo Petro, the opposition leader, will be giving a speech to denounce the humanitarian crisis in Colombia.
Outgoing President Juan Manuel Santos spent his last day in office launching a cybersecurity platform in the capital, Bogotá. Santos finishes his 8 years in office having negotiated a peace agreement with the FARC, but he wasn't able to see it through to its full implementation. He also started peace talks with the National Liberation Army. However, Santos also leaves a country highly polarized with a wave of violence against social movements.
During President Juan Manuel Santos' 2 terms in office, a number of commitments were breached. The 2-term administration was met with strikes and protests from various sectors of Colombian society, but particularly by social movements and rural organizations which had hoped to see an agrarian reform in Colombia.
Santos is living without outlining campesino reservation areas. Without a program for substitution of crops, he is only succeed in taking away the FARC's weapons.
One of the main achievements of the government of Juan Manuel Santos was the signing of the peace accord reached with the FARC, a process which returned hope to millions of Colombians affected by the armed conflict.
There are opportunities to set up territories as ethnic communities within a territory, as campesino communities. Our view of the implementation is very positive.
But despite the efforts of the communities to implement the peace agreement, there were countless breaches.
A point of non-compliance with the processes of indigenous people, the processes of the black people in Colombia, and I would say with all processes by different social sectors.
Communities, primarily indigenous, campesino, and Afro-descendant, continue to suffer from state violence and from the effects of being abandoned by the government.
The war takes place in our territories, not in the Palace of Nariño. And so those breaches have caused the conflict to deepen internally in our territories, at very high costs, resulting in displacement and cost to the lives of our people.
Santos leaves without fulfilling commitments with former combatants of the FARC, and without developing commitments following the large-scale agrarian strikes. The civic strikes in Chocó and in Buenaventura of 2017, or the teachers' strikes.
This
outgoing government has been neglectful, failing Colombia's teachers. We didn't bet on the government so that they could be re-elected for the peace agreement, nor for its economic model. We didn't want the referendum. This government had the ability to increase the gross domestic product by 7.5%, and absolutely nothing happened.
And although Juan Manuel Santos won the Nobel Peace Prize, the reality is that violence and systematic murder continue throughout Colombia's territories. And after 8 years, during which he continued neoliberal policies, fundamental rights such as education, housing, and health continue to be violated, making Colombia the third most unequal country in the world.
We turn now to Mexico, where after the elections, consumer confidence has increased to historic levels, boosted by the victory of progressive candidate Andrés Manuel López Obrador.
5 weeks after Mexico's presidential elections and 4 months until Andrés Manuel López Obrador takes office, Mexicans are optimistic about the country's future.
I believe people trust him because he is a president for the people. He came from the people, and we rule for the people.
Mexico will transform into a different country as long as new measures against corruption are enforced.
We, Mexicans, will be more prone to pay all taxes as long as we are sure that they are well used.
These opinions reflect the last report by the National Institute of Statistics, which says that the consumer's confidence reached historic levels in July. Representatives from different sectors also show their trust in the president-elect.
AMLO is a committed leader to a radical transformation for Mexico, a fourth transformation, a plan that needs the support of all Mexicans.
López Obrador ratified his commitment to eradicate corruption. He said that this and other misbehavior will be left in the past come December 1st.
There has been a lot of corruption, and it's eating away from the budget.
López Obrador's development plan from south to north is aimed at generating jobs that would allow Mexicans to work in their own country instead of migrating.
The relation is going to change. No one is going to threaten us with closing or militarizing borders and building walls.
At the same time, López Obrador promised that public work will be allocated based in qualifications over political interests. López Obrador will be officially named as Mexico President-Elect this Wednesday.
In Argentina, the National Federation of University Teachers has gone on strike all across the country. They want better wages and they want the government to increase the budget for education.
The government so far hasn't responded to the teachers' demands, so classes have been suspended. The Federation of University Education delivered a petition to the Ministry of Education explaining what they need.
It's a strike that begins today, but it will last all week if we don't get positive answers. We will continue because this is a serious situation we're living in.
It is totally justified. Teachers haven't had a wage increase since 2015.
More than 190,000 teachers from all around the country rejected the government's proposal for a 15% wage increase, which they say is way below the inflation rate, which is expected to be 30% in 2018.
There hasn't been a proposal by the government, and we believe it's because the proposal wouldn't be more than 15%, as they are doing in other places, putting a wage cap of 15%. That just means there's a loss of purchasing power.
Both professors and university students question the severe budget cut implemented for public education. Last week, 2 school staff members died, and the government isn't moving swiftly enough to investigate.
There is a degree of perversion to this government, and it's not just happening in education, but with all workers. It's not what the president says that there is a storm, but there is a plan to transfer income from the most vulnerable sectors to the richest.
The university teachers say that the adjustment to public education that is being carried out by the government of Mauricio Macri is serious. It does not only reduce wages, it also hurts student training. They anticipate that they will continue with the forceful measures until they achieve a salary increase based on their collective bargaining.
And that's not the only protest happening in Argentina today. Our correspondent, Sabrina Roth, is at another in the capital, Buenos Aires.
We are at the St. Cayetano protest, organized by different social and workers' organizations. Demonstrators are walking towards Plaza de Mayo to demand that President Mauricio Macri modify his economic policies and the austerity measures that they say have affected the most vulnerable sectors of society. Workers are also demanding that the government discuss 5 bills that were proposed during a previous march. One of the bills focuses on an emergency food plan for the popular neighborhoods. The most important slogan for the march is "Out International Monetary Fund," in reference to the $50 billion loan the government signed with the international organization.
Now to Venezuela, where officials there continue to investigate the circumstances surrounding the attempted assassination of President Nicolas Maduro on Saturday. Maduro met with high-level officials on Monday evening and said all of those who carried out the attack had been captured. Maduro explained that they're now seeking the mastermind of the attack. The president has said they have sufficient evidence to believe the Colombian oligarchy was involved in the attack, including President Juan Manuel Santos.
We have the location, the name of the place where in Chinacota, in the north of Santander, the training of the assassins, the terrorists, was held with Colombian trainers. All of this will be demonstrated in the coming hours, the evidence and the testimonies. Our people want justice against terrorism.
More news in a minute, but first here's this video from our colleagues in multimedia. Welcome back. Bolivia marked 193 years of independence from Spanish colonialism on Monday. This time they highlighted the great economic achievements made after 12 years of the current administration.
The main Independence Day celebration took place in the city of Potosí, where President Evo Morales highlighted the economic strength achieved during his administration and thanks to the strategic nationalization of companies.
Some people will surely be embarrassed by this, but after 180 years, we were left with a GDP of 9.5 billion, and now after only 12 years, we have 28.2 billion GDP.
On Independence Day, the head of state celebrated all that the country has recovered during recent years and all that the country has achieved in terms of economic and political autonomy.
The U.S. Embassy doesn't rule this country anymore, nor the World Bank, nor does the IMF rule economically. As Brother Alvaro used to say, the Chicago boys used to govern this country. Now it is the Chuquiago boys who govern. Let me state this more clearly. The gringos used to govern this country. Now it is us, the Indios, who govern.
He also warned about some political opposition sectors which continue fighting to bring back the past, who wish to once again be led by the United States.
We know that the North American Empire will never think about the people. The North American Empire only wishes to steal our wealth, as they've always done. They divide us to dominate us, so they can rob us economically. Thanks to the Bolivian people, we have built up Bolivia.
President Morales also said that by the end of the year, the final decision of the International Court of The Hague on the maritime litigation against Chile will be known. He asked the people to stand together and reassure that the government has a strategy for the final stage.
Police in Peru have destroyed an illegal gold mining camp in the Amazon. 9 people were arrested during the raid. Authorities destroyed 13 engines and demolished 30 hoppers, the material that is used in illegal mining. Wildcat gold mining in the Madre de Dios region has flourished into a black market trade estimated to be worth billions of dollars a year. Miners have dumped a lot of mercury into the rivers, making the fish there no longer safe to be eaten. In Colombia, firemen and emergency services are working to stop a wildfire in the national park of the Paracé volcano in the southern department of Cauca. They're helping the local indigenous Coco Nucos in their attempt to dam the fires that are spreading along the slopes of the volcano since Monday. But the complex geography of the area is making their work harder. The Red Cross and the Civil Defense have also arrived to the national park to help. And the debate on the legalization of abortion has spread to Brazil as the Supreme Court is scheduled to begin debating it on Friday. More than 50 representatives from health, religious, academic, and non-governmental sectors will participate in a public hearing in an attempt to scrap the country's restrictive abortion law. Pro-abortion rights activists gathered outside the court's headquarters on Tuesday, while Brazilian churches rang their bells against a possible bill. Unsafe abortions in the country cause at least 200 deaths every year and leave 250,000 women hospitalized. Abortion is only legal in Brazil if the woman has been raped, her life is in danger, or the fetus has a fatal brain disorder.
This kind of discussion is not for the moral or religious arena. It's in the arena of human dignity and the right to choose. Autonomy is a word you don't need to justify. Either you have autonomy to do something or you don't.
Brazil has begun an immunization campaign to vaccinate 11 million children against a measles outbreak. Brazil is on a drive to vaccinate all children between the ages of 1 and 5. The Sao Paulo State Health Secretariat aims to administer the vaccine to more than 11 million children, with around 2.2 million in Sao Paulo alone are expected to receive the vaccine. Puerto Rican activists are protesting against the growing violence against women on the island, and they're demanding greater commitment from the government to combat it. 42 women have been violently murdered by their partners over the last 3 years, an extremely high number given the population of the island. According to the collective La Juntilla X or X, politicians should bear some responsibility. The hashtag Son sus muertas has gone viral, and it's aimed at legislators, according to women's rights organizations. These politicians have failed to create laws that protect women. And Antigua and Barbuda is being looked to as a model jurisdiction for sexual offense cases. Medical practitioners, prosecutors, magistrates, and staff from the social services have all undergone special training to better treat with victims of sexual offenses and child abuse. In the end, the country hopes to open a sexual offenses court. The new court will fast-track cases and will allow video conference testimonies in special cases. They hope the court will be implemented throughout the Caribbean.
For the objectives of the Sexual Offense Model Court to be realized, all of the persons involved in sexual assault reports, the handling, case management, and everything have definitely got to be on board, and we need to have stronger collaboration.
And Antigua and Barbuda is celebrating Carnival. Thousands lined the streets of St. John's on Monday for Juve celebrations. They celebrated with water, powder and paint, as is tradition to open the festivities. Police were out in full force, and they say there were no major incidents to report. And Barbadians wearing elaborate costumes took to the streets of the capital, Bridgetown, on Monday. People danced and paraded to soca music on Grand Kadooman Day, or the Barbadian Carnival celebration. Masqueraders traditionally start from the National Stadium and proceed along a route that includes the Spring Garden Highway for a day of partying on the streets.
A symbolic representation of the end of the sugarcane harvest.
And a former Barbadian Minister of Industry, Donville Innes, has been arrested and charged in Florida with money laundering. The former lawmaker is accused of accepting bribes from an insurance company in 2015 and 2016 when he was a public official. According to the indictment, Innes engaged in a scheme to accept approximately $36,000 in bribes from senior executives and laundered that money through the United States. He's accused of using his position to help the company secure 2 government contracts. Okay, so we're going to take a short break now, but join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. An earthquake that wreaked havoc on Indonesia's tourist island of Lombok, killing at least 100 and leaving thousands homeless, has now created a humanitarian crisis. People are in need of clean water, food, medicine and shelter. Around 75% of the north has been without electricity since Sunday. The authorities say that some communities affected by the disaster have been hard to reach because of damaged bridges and roads. And earlier we spoke to a resident of Lombok who told us in his own words the gravity of the situation.
Well, we've had no power, water. I mean, for the last 48 hours, I was living on potato crisps and biscuits, as I think a lot of other people also. In terms of, again, on Gili itself, it's a different situation on Lombok, being a larger island. But on Gili itself, since evacuate everyone from the island, start to clean up, there's not a real issue with that right now.
The Bangladesh government has passed a new law on road safety after unprecedented mass student protests over the killing of 2 students by a speeding bus last week. The new law gives a 5-year prison sentence for causing death due to reckless driving. Students between the ages of 15 to 18 protested for 10 days. The local media on Monday reported that many students were injured after the police attacked them. There have also been reports of a crackdown on the journalists who cover these protests. One renowned photographer has been arrested for allegedly commenting on the mishandling of the students by the police. And wildfires in California are now the largest ever. Let's take a look at that and other news from around the world.
Wildfires engulfing parts of California in the United States have doubled in recent days to become the largest in the state's history. The two wildfires, known as the Mendocino Complex Fire, have spread to cover 283,800 acres of land, surpassing last year's Thomas Fire. More than 14,000 firefighters are trying to put the blazes out, but weather conditions are fueling them. Authorities say it may take another week to extinguish. So far, only 30% has been contained. More than 1,000 people marched in Sfax, Tunisia against a raft of reforms proposed by President Beji Essebsi. His reforms include equality of inheritance and the abolition of the death penalty, which have been met with opposition by religious associations. Under the supervision of the police, demonstrators chanted, "No Eastern, no Western, Tunisia is an Islamic state."
We want to withdraw these proposals because they undermine the principles of Islam and represent a threat to the family and the state.
The Wall Street Journal has reported that Facebook approached a number of banks in the United States to obtain data on users' financial transactions. The social media giant has denied the allegations and insists that some users had voluntarily opted into accessing some financial information in its Messenger app, further adding that such data wasn't used for advertising purposes. According to the Wall Street Journal, Facebook requested information from JP Morgan, Chase, Wells Fargo, Citigroup and US Bank Corp on account balances and card transactions.
And we've come to the end of this news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at talisirtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. For Talisir English, I'm Suni Gray. Thank you for watching.